That's enough confirmation. So thank you again for attending this session. My name's Jess Iandiorio, and I'm here to talk today about She's Not Strategic. A 2-second introduction to myself. By day, I am the Chief Marketing Officer of a tech company. And by night, I'm a mom to 3 wonderful boys. Those are my 3 sons. You can see us in our vacation in Maine recently. And by moonlight, when I have time, which is not very often, I love to write. And I typically write about things related to my experience. So I've written about it's time for family-friendly tech. I've written about this topic, She's Not Strategic. I've also written about general management topics and many more things. So I love spending my time writing. There's a lot I write that I don't publish, which is why you see me publish on average once per year. So today's flow, I'm going to talk about this topic, She's Not Strategic, and help you identify if you're suffering and what you can possibly do about this. I'm going to talk about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship, and truly you need both. And I'm going to preview my next article, Bad Managers with Good Narratives. So I put a little spicy pepper on this one because it's a hot topic. I'm going to talk for the next 15 minutes or so, but I would love for you to use that Q&A function as we go. I'm just going to check it and see if people have submitted any questions. Go ahead and feel free. It is open. I'm going to confirm and notify one more time. There we go. Hey, Matt, how are you? Okay, so going to get started fully now. So what is this SNS disease thing? I got this question a lot. And when I've been talking about She's Not Strategic, I've also likened it to a disease that kind of follows you. And once you get this diagnosis of being not strategic, it really can follow you. So first, I'm going to explain why I decided to write about this. I had a former perspective when I was having these 3 children and building my career, that particular phase in life where women are forced to take timeouts, and that's ahead of maternity leave, during maternity leave, and when you return, things are different. So I really viewed that period as one of the most significant reasons for the wage and leadership gap, because those timeouts create actually long time periods where you feel you can't advocate for yourself, you can't ask for a raise, and you come back from maternity leave and again feel like you can't ask for anything because you were just out. So I've changed my perspective. I've come through having those 3 children. I'm on the other side, and it's not that that is diminished, because I think it is still very relevant, but I started to build this new perspective the more senior I became and the more I was in the room when decisions were being made. And that new perspective about a specific bias I see being held against women and men. I did get a lot of feedback when I wrote this that this applies to men as well, so I 100% agree. I also got feedback it applies outside of tech. I definitely agree. But it's this bias-based issue about a perception of one's capabilities to be strategic or not. The second reason I wrote it is that I have just gained a greater understanding of unconscious bias at work and when and how it shows up. I used to not understand it or notice it as much, and now I can see it pretty clearly. So this one I wanted to highlight. The last reason I wrote this is just pattern recognition. Now that I'm in those rooms where I see the decisions made, and when we're talking about talent within an organization, who says what about whom, I've been able to recognize patterns, I'd say at least over the last 5 to 7 years. And in particular, I see a challenge between director and VP level. I see that directors often struggle to get beyond director roles. And when I was noticing this, I also noticed a consistent sort of party line, or the thing that was said inside the room. And it was almost a whisper. She's not strategic. You know, we'd like to put her into the role. We'd like to give her an opportunity, but she's not really strategic. And I've heard this a lot, and you may have heard it as well. There are other phrases that I've heard that are basically saying this thing. They're slightly different. So she's great at execution, but she can't call the shots, or she isn't calling the shots. That's another way you might hear this show up. When she speaks, she shares too many details, not enough big picture. I have suffered from this often. I'm trying to explain myself. I feel the details matter. And ultimately, I've realized that that is not clear communication to an executive and can diminish their perception of your potential. Or she's a great manager, but I don't see her being a strong leader. This difference between management and leadership is real, but what's underneath it is something everybody needs to dig into. Lastly, something else I hear is I would need to see a bigger contribution beyond the ability to execute someone else's ideas. There's many more phrases that are subtle like this, but really are indicating that the person in the position to decide on the promotion does not view the other person as capable of that leadership role. but I like to call bullshit. So that is what I've done with this article. I'm going to do something crazy. I promise I'm not an egomaniac, but there's 2 slides here where I'm just going to quote from the research itself or the report itself. And the point I'd like to make is that I think this is false. It's a false narrative. It is not the case in more than half the times, maybe 75% of the time, that a woman or a man labeled not strategic is really not strategic. The reality as I see it is that people are often so competent at execution that when they prove themselves able to get things done, they are rewarded with more and more and more work. And the work piles on such that people do not have time to step back and become more strategic. In this particular portion of the article was the most highlighted. And I think it hits people in the gut. This is how I used to feel. There isn't time. You're a top performer. You're rewarded with more work, and there just isn't time to step back. There's only time to execute, especially if you're dealing with other things outside of work, family life, or other obligations or hobbies. It's hard to do a great job executing and then also find time to step back and think more strategically. So this really seemed to strike a chord with many women and men. When you perform well, you are rewarded with more work. And that, in fact, can be something that prevents you from rising because you're just under so much work. One more point I want to make is it's not just one missed promotion. This can follow you. And what I mean by that is when your resume says director, 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 or manager, 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 and you don't get to that next click, when you go to interview, they're going to look at your experience. And what they're going to say is this person hasn't moved up. They might be a good manager, but probably not a good leader. It's going to say things about you without you having the chance to explain yourself. So it's highly unfortunate. And here's my summary slide of what SNS disease is. It's a bias held by people in power. And this can be both men and women. Both men and women are guilty of falsely labeling someone not strategic. It's often against women, but it is also some men. And it's based largely on a perception, not necessarily facts or truths, that they cannot be strategic and contribute to the whole success of the business, and are unfortunately therefore blocked from a promotion. So that to me feels like a disease. And then to double down on it, when the promotion loss drives you to leave and your resume doesn't show leadership progression, you are also likely to not get the higher title and the bigger job at the next company, but a lateral role. So I don't know if you thought you signed up for a depressing talk. I promise you it's not a depressing talk, but it is a tough topic. This is a highly sensitive, tough topic. And I'm here to help with what sounds harsh, but I think is very much the reality based on the response I got. And I want to move forward into what can you do? What can be done about this? So this is for the leaders, the people at the table making the decisions about someone and whether they deserve the promotion or not. I want you to ask yourself, there's 3 questions. 1, has she been able to recruit and retain a high performance team? This is such an important skill set in leadership. And if a person can recruit and retain a high performance team, that means they can sell the business, they can motivate team members and drive performance. So that is highly strategic. And if this person is able to do that, they have strategic capability. Next is, have they, she or he, brought new ideas to the table that had a positive impact on the business? Is this a person who reached above and beyond their charter to identify a problem, present a solution, and create a positive impact? If that has happened even once, this person is strategic and you shouldn't discount them. Third, does she or he understand all business functions and how they're connected? So that's really important. If you, like me, run marketing, you need to understand sales, you need to understand alliances, you need to understand the growth strategy, you need to understand the competitive landscape. So if you build an understanding of areas of the business outside your own, you are strategic. And for the person making the decision in this case, if the candidate does have that understanding, they certainly have strategic capabilities. And I would encourage you to check yourself before you pass on that person for a promotion. For the people who are sitting across the screen from me and thinking, shit, this is me. I have suffered from this. I have not been able to get to that next click in my career, and I don't know what to do about it. I'm just going to build this out here. There's 5 things, and just so you know, these are slightly different than the article. I took the opportunity to hone them a little bit for this presentation. So 1, I just mentioned recruiting and motivating high performance teams. Definitely build that skill out and study the difference between management and leadership. Management meaning move the work through the team, leadership meaning inspiring teams to go beyond. Next, strategically volunteer. I'm going to talk about this one for a minute. Early in my career, I volunteered for everything, and I was trying to help, but I was also trying to increase my visibility. And I learned sort of the hard way that certain types of volunteerism are not useful to you in your career development. And that would often be office housework. If I volunteered for a party or some other planning committee that wasn't necessarily impacting the growth trajectory of the business, I was less successful moving up than if I just focused my volunteerism time on one of the growth trajectories of the business or coming up with solutions to problems. So really think about how you raise your hand and what you volunteer for. Next is keep it simple. I think it deserves time because there are so many details that are important when we're executing our work, but how we present what we're doing and the contribution it's making needs to be really tight, really short. And that's the only way for people to hear what you're saying, but it's also the best way for them to view you as strategic. So really think about keeping it simple when you're presenting. Very few slides, very few words, as few as humanly possible. I didn't do a great job here, but hopefully you get the point. Next, ask the right questions. I've often had good moments in my career where I asked a good question in front of a large audience. Take advantage of moments like that, but even in your everyday, think about the questions that you're asking. And are they directed at what the business needs to grow and to be better? And are you asking those of the right people in positions of power such that they can take away from your conversation, hey, this person really cares about the business? Last point here, build your visibility up. Make sure your strategic contributions are clear. So when you go above and beyond, or when you kick the shit out of an awesome project that has a high impact, you just need to make sure people know that you led that or you contributed to that. This is often a tough topic, both for women and men, but I see it more with women, to communicate or market themselves for what they've contributed. And you have to figure out how to find your authentic path through that. It's not an option to not figure out how to market yourself if you want to move up. Hopefully those resonate, but I'm going to transition to topic 2, which is you'll need more. I published a sequel, which is She's Not Strategic, Women Are Over-Mentored and Under-Sponsored. So I thought about after the initial paper I wrote and the feedback I got back, and a lot of people shared their stories. I've had hundreds of people reach out saying that they had that challenge, they asked for advice, or they were just explaining how they'd implemented some of the tactics. But this particular topic came up often, that people felt they didn't have someone in their corner helping them to understand what was really going on and what they could do better. So often people default to mentorship. So if I'm having a tough time, I need to either go out and find a formal or informal mentor who can help me think about my career, how to improve, how to grow. And mentors are wonderful. So I don't want to discount that. I have millions of them. They're peers. They're people who work for me. They're people who I've worked for. And I learn a little something from all of them. So mentorship is amazing. But they're not able to open a door. So be really clear with yourself about who's helping you and if they're in a position to open a door for you. Sponsors are very different. They're at the table. They're in the room when these decisions are being made. And they're in positions to open that door and either endorse you for a promotion someone else is giving or hire you themselves. So these people are in positions of power, and you need to work for both. Spend time with your mentors to get feedback, but you absolutely need to find your way to someone who can sponsor you at that executive level, in particular if you're trying to go from director to VP. So last thing I want to talk about is this new article I'm writing, Watch Out for Bad Managers. And in particular, bad managers with good narratives. Now, before I learned that the Q&A is that there's no live chat, I wanted to ask you all for your perceptions about what this means, because every time I talk about it, people are laughing and like it seems to make sense to them right away. So I'm writing this and I'm open to feedback as I go on different perceptions here. But since we can't have live Q&A, I will just define for you what I think bad managers with good narratives is about. So in my world, bad managers only care about themselves. They are selfish. They will use your achievements to better their standing. Good narratives are stories that make people sound great at their job. And this article is about the collision of those two things. When you get a bad manager who is selfish, who uses a narrative to their professional advantage and your disadvantage. This is definitely happening. So yes, you need to do all the things I outlined on being more strategic. Yes, you need to find sponsorships, but you also have to watch out for some of these things that might be happening around you. And the Truth is, narratives or stories shape perceptions, and perceptions become reality. This is a lot of the unfairness that I'm talking about with this bias-based issue. But narrative is absolutely at play. And just a few examples of what I'm talking about here. On the left-hand side, we have the manager talking about the employee. Manager says, Sarah was getting bogged down in the details, so I brought the project up a level. The perception that creates is Sarah can't up level and Sarah doesn't have leadership potential. Or the bad manager might say, Sarah has had trouble finding a candidate for her open role, so I hired a recruiter. In that case, the manager looks good because they've intervened and solved the problem, but the perception created is Sarah can't recruit her own talent, Sarah doesn't have leadership potential. Last example, I think you probably understand where I'm at on this idea, is Sarah delivered on her part of the project, but I noticed it overlapped with another team, so I made sure she collaborated. Again, manager is the hero in this story. They spotted the problem and created a solution. Sarah, however, unfortunately, now people perceive that she works in a silo. She doesn't have leadership potential. So this, I think, is absolutely at play. I think she's not strategic is a perception and a bias-based issue, often not rooted in fact. And this sort of bad managers with good narratives, I really think good narratives are at play in this perception-based issue. And what you need to do is make sure your manager's narrative isn't marginalizing your career, because this whole topic is about career marginalization, which is unfair based on perceptions, not reality, and it can impact women and men. So to wrap up, before we do go to Q&A, please go ahead and use that tab and submit any questions you have. I'll take them as we go. We did a meme contest yesterday at work, and it was a ton of fun. So I decided to meme myself as a way to wrap up, because you might be thinking this is a lot to take in. So I need to be more strategic, but I also need to find mentors and sponsors, and I need to watch out for people who have knives behind their back, who happen to be my manager, and what perceptions they might create about my work. So I was kind of kicking myself thinking there's a lot in this talk that might make one think this is not achievable or it's too hard and complex. And I thought about how can I simplify this, but then I landed on it's true. It's really hard. There's nothing easy about this. And so you just need to be aware of what is going on around you and what you can do in your circle of control to change your perception and put yourself into a better position. But it is definitely hard. And good fortune comes to those who do a good job intersecting opportunity and planning. So I really think that's what this is about. So those opportunities might be few and far between, but when you are good about the strategy of building your career and planning for the next opportunity and being ready with all these things that I've explained as tactics, I think you'll find yourself in a much better spot from a progression standpoint. Lastly, you've got this. I have heard a lot of people come back to me saying, I use this, I sat down with my manager, we talked about it, I've got a plan, or I got a promotion. So that really warms my heart. And I really hope that this was helpful for people in the audience. Before we go to Q&A, I just decided one more thing to add to this topic, which would be fun, would be the FSNS checklist. So hopefully you understand where I'm going there, but the real quick wrap up is work on your recruiting skills and create and motivate that team to perform. Understand the difference between managing and leading. Strategically volunteer. Kiss when presenting. This just made me laugh. I don't think you should actually make out with people while you're presenting, but keep it simple. Ask the right questions. Build your visibility up. Very important that it goes up. And understand the difference between mentors and sponsors. You need both. And watch out for those bad managers with good narratives that might be really in your way. So thank you so much for attending the talk. You have my email here if you'd like to get in touch. And if anybody would like to ask a question, I would be very happy to answer.